Hello and welcome to this episode of Talkin Trim. I'm Jonathon Skinner and today we're looking at some interior trim panels for the Jaguar XK140 Drophead Coupe model, so that's the DHC model. For the purposes of this video, I've separated out the interior trim panels for the main cabin area only. So I've excluded the boot trunk area. This is purely for the main cabin area, and these are purely the panels that we supply as standard, fully retrimmed onto new backing boards, whether that be a millboard, a hardboard or a metal. I've excluded, for the purposes of this video, things like the material retrim kits. So they're either materials cut to shape and or sewn, if applicable, for retrimming to either reusable panels, things like plies, or the actual bodywork itself. See a separate video for that. So that's the way our interior trim panels work. We separate them between fully trimmed panels and retrim kits as per listed on our website. So these are purely the trimmed panels. To give a very brief overview of what we're looking at in this video before I go into more depth of them, starting at the front of the car, we've got the underdash panel that goes from left to right. It's for a left-hand drive car. I'll go into more detail. Then you've got the dash top panel, Footwell A Post Panels, main door panels including the pocket flap, B post quarter panels, the rear parcel shelf and a rear light fillet panel. In terms of OEM spec on these bits and bobs, the underdash all the way back to the B post quarter panels would have been originally leaving the factory in a level cloth vinyl material, whatever you want to refer to it as. From now on, I'll just refer to it as vinyl. That's what's commonly used these days. Just before I go any further, it's worth noting that these are actually full leather parts. The customer has gone for a bespoke kit, so just bear that in mind. It's actually a ivory colour, so very light colour, and it's a smooth leather as well, so it hasn't got much of graining to it at all. A brave choice. It's going to look nice, but hell of a colour to keep clean. But yeah, it will look stunning. Moving further back in the car, the rear shelf, this was moquette, and the rear light fillet panel was headliner material. And the reason for that is, as they got towards the back of the car, Jaguar started using different materials. So this was moquette because it's surrounded by the rear access door to the boot area, which the facing panel in the cabin area was also moquette, as well as the surrounding wheel arches. So to give you a view, this is the rear shelf. It's the horizontal panel you can't really see that's up here, but this rear hatch panel here, that was a plywood panel, and it was moquette on this side and hardura on the boot side. So obviously it's sat right next to this, so moquette on moquette matches, etc. Same again with the wheel arches. You've got the main wheel arch there, and then these small little wheel arches here, differential hump here, and even the surrounds of the rear seats, they were all moquette. And so they started using some of these materials different areas of the car because of the pliability and the texture change adds a different contrast to the car. So this is why they started doing those sorts of bits and bobs, and that's why certain panels are trimmed in certain materials. So that's the lowdown on OEM spec. In terms of the backing panels, underdashes were a millboard material, as were the A post panels, as were the rear shelf and fillet panels there. And the reason for that is millboard is often used because it's got a bit more flexibility. This is a prime example here where you need the flex in it to get it to bend around in the car to the contour just below that rear window there. Underdashes often had to get sort of wiggled into place to get them to fit nicely, so millboard is useful. And then same again on these A posts here, to get them into the car they actually sort of bent like that quite significantly as well, so that's why they were millboard. The dash top doors were hardboard material, strong hardboard material, and then these are metal here. So with that being said, let me get up onto the CNC here and I'll go over all of these parts in a bit more detail with you, starting at the very front. So as I've mentioned before, underdash is actually for a left-hand driver. It's a bit confusing, this one as well, because it's effectively upside down at the moment, because it gets put in the car the other way up, and like I said, it's for a left-hand drive. So the underdash effectively went from left to right underneath here. Millboard material, got all the necessary cutouts, etc. for the steering wheel column, etc, etc. Then going on to the desktop panel, left to right on the car, that's this panel here. You see the air vents and the rear window elements here. We do the necessary slots, etc. With these sorts of things, we always like to give people the most flexibility possible. These were inconsistently made cars, and so with a lot of these parts, some of the bits and bobs like the air vent holes, etc, always best to do those in situation when you've got the hardware elements in hand, because there's no point us trying to trim around those and you fiddle around with some of the hardware parts. It's much easier to have the hardware part, cut the slit in the material to suit your hardware part, thus not overdoing it. A post panels, Footwell panels. So it went left to right, obviously. You had a left and a right, and they go in the car like that, and they bend up and round. They sit basically down here. You can't really see. That's, there you are, you can see that one there underneath. And it's got the hole in it, obviously, for the air vents, etc. Millboard, so it allows it to bend up and around. And you'll see we've left a loose flap on the bottom edge. That's done deliberately. Again, allows for neat trimming during the fitment process, where you can tuck that underneath the adjacent underfelted carpet and make a seamless finish between the floor and the panel. Moving on to the door panels. So you can see it's got the pocket flap, which is a separate trimmed panel, which is then attached. We use the correct style piping, thickness piping, and it's worth noting, because we've done these in leather, the piping has been skived down on our in-house leather skiving machine beforehand to make sure that we maintain the correct thickness of piping for originality. You can see it's trimmed on. It's a lovely pocket these days, presumably for maps back in the day, but very handy for a smartphone these days. Looking at the backing panel here, you can see how nice and neatly the pocket has been trimmed on there as it comes through the back. Again, we've got a flap on the very top edge, again done deliberately, as woodwork panel sits on top, so you tuck the material underneath the woodwork, so you thus have a seamless gap between the two. Otherwise you might have a bit of an air gap if you tried to trim that over and round then the woodwork panel on top of it. And you'll see as well, we've left the floated area there for the door latch mechanism. Again, done deliberately. It's much better to do that in situ with your specific door latch mechanism than for us to take a gamble. So a lot of these things are done by design. It's not us being lazy, it's us knowing what we're talking about in terms of the best way of trimming these cars. Moving further back, you've got the B-post quarter panels, which are obviously these panels here. They intertwine with obviously the hood frame. So they're a metal panel following the curvature of the wheel arch there, then bent round, and then has the lip on the front of it there for attaching in. As mentioned briefly, we trim these all the way around, and we actually trim this very top part here because it is semi on show when the hood frame is retracted down at the back, and so it's nice to cover it in the same matching interior material so it all ties in. But it's also a nice defense against the headliner and the hood kind of rub up against the inside of that when it's all down in place, as you can see here. And so trimming that extra bit there stops any sort of debris or oil getting onto the headliner over time, because it's onto the material instead. So it's a nice little touch there. Again, from years of making these things, it's a bit of feedback that we've had from people, and worked it in, and also meticulously looking at how they were done originally. At the back of the car, rear shelf. Fortunately, you can't really see it in this picture here, but it's effectively that panel there that sits on top. Like I say, moquette to match the surrounding wheel arch, rear hatch areas. And then you have the rear light fillet panel, which is the all cloth headliner material, made in the exact same material to match the headliner which surrounds it. Obviously sits left to right on the car underneath the rear window area there. So yeah, comprehensive guide there. Obviously worth checking out both our website and any other videos that I've done for the other areas of the cabin, i.e. the retrim kits, because things like the wheel arches and the rear hatch area will fall into place nicely with those bits and bobs. I'll probably include these specific parts in that same video just for the sake of clarity, so worth checking that out as well. And obviously the boot area, carpets and seats will all be on separate videos as well. So I hope that's been informative and not too long. I've tried to keep it as brief and informative as possible. Thanks for tuning in. Please remember to like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.